Well, I wasn't planning on drinking today, but I just spent the last, oh, 2 hours or so recording an episode, then re recording an episode, and then working on the thumbnail, and then editing the audio, posting the podcast, planning on simultaneously posting a video, but for whatever reason, OBS decided not to export or save the video I recorded. So, here's hoping it works this time. Welcome back, my friends, to the Dime Store Cinema, where we talk movies and culture. Today, we're going to talk about the Ty West movie, X. Now, this was released by A24, which has, in recent history, released some pretty good movies. So I was pretty excited about this one. Now, I will say I haven't gone out and sought every single A24 release that's come out, but I try to see the horror films, at least the ones that interest me, and this was definitely one of them. Ty West is definitely a competent filmmaker, and this has a very a style that I generally like. It has a grindhouse kind of early days of slasher film vibe to it. And the movie is very much in keeping with that. It is set in that time frame, and it is a callback to those movies in a very real sense. Now, there are some aspects of this movie that I genuinely enjoy, primarily the cinematography and some clever ideas. Now, the reason why I'm not going to be singing this movie's praises, however, is because a lot of those good ideas were not actually acted upon. And uh, despite the good cinematography and despite some of the good ideas and despite the very competent homage that it's paying to early days in slasher movie cinema, it came off more tame than I was anticipating, and it came off a little underwhelming. It didn't really follow through on any of the through lines they seemed to start building up, which would have made the film a little bit more interesting. Now, I'm going to try not to spoil or to have any spoilers with this movie review. If I genuinely like a movie and think people should watch it, I'll be sure to never put any spoilers in it, because I genuinely want people to go watch it. If I'm on the fence about it, I might include some spoilers. I might not. If it's something that I genuinely hate, then I'll probably go ahead and spoil it, because if I genuinely hate it, in my opinion, it's not really worth your time to watch. Now, I'm trying to get better at this, trying to avoid those spoilers for y'all. So let's get into this. Let's what we'll do is I'll kind of go over a general overview of some of the things that stood out to me, and then we'll get into some spoiler territory. I'll warn you first, so if you're still interested by the time we get to that point, you can go ahead and stop, go watch it, and then come back. So here we go. The premise of this movie is that a group of filmmakers are rented a farmhouse from an elderly couple to shoot an adult film. Very simple premise, makes it very easy to get all of the characters involved into one place. It's a solid reason. I'd say it's even better than the normal going to a cabin in the woods with friends, or going camping, or a party, or a it's up there with maybe Friday the 13th with the summer camp. You know, you're isolated in a place, you have a reason to be there. Much more so than just, you know, hanging out with your friends. It's kind of a weak selling point necessitate a gathering in a relatively weird and secluded place. This, however, given the time frame that it's shot in, adult films were definitely a little more difficult to find places that are amiable to them, and for the people that will like this type of movie, I think it'll speak to them as far as uh, the uh, the aspect of making a film and the excitement that typically is garnered by the people involved in it. So I think that idea is really good, and I think that forcing them to be there is also interesting. So one of the one of the reoccurring themes is the search for stardom, right? The search to become a known entity. Now you have the jaded adult film star of sorts who has kind of relegated themselves to their role and not expecting themselves to be much more, but are still anticipating money. Then you have the idealistic character in this movie who is working towards becoming a star, and that is her through line through the whole movie. And I'll get to that in the spoilers of where I think they should have gone and where they did go, and how I think my idea is better. But obviously, if it's my idea, I'm going to think it's better. But I'm not a filmmaker, so it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, right? In any case, you have the director who wants to make an adult film that is also avant garde and relevant and important. So you have a very high ego film director, which is a stereotype, but is a very accurate stereotype. Um, and of course, you have this sleazy producer who's putting the money up so he thinks he can tell everyone what to do. It's also very stereotypical, but also, stereotypes are there for a reason. Then you have the sound girl, which is the girlfriend of the director. And she has an interesting arc, and I'll get into that with the spoilers as well, because she has an interesting turn in the movie that set her up to be a more important character than she ended up actually being. So we'll get to that, like I said, when I get into the spoilers. So you have your basic characters. Now they're set up a little differently than a lot of horror film characters. They're not quite as stereotypical as far as the uh, horror trope stereotypes. They're a different type of stereotype. They're the film industry, uh, the independent artist stereotype. As far as trying to get into cinema, you have the people who are essentially starting or trying to start their career and forced to do things that they wouldn't necessarily prefer to be doing. Then, of course, you have the old couple that they're renting the farmhouse from. Oh, of course, and I'm sorry, I forgot one of the characters. One of the characters is a Vietnam vet. He kind of plays the stallion of the, if you will, of the adult films. Uh, he's there because he enjoys doing what he does and he likes to get paid for it. So uh, I was somewhat sad that, well, not even sad, because this movie really didn't do much to build or develop any of the characters particularly well. His character, I think, could have been more interesting, um, but for what it was, I guess it was okay. But I mean, we'll kind of get into that. I don't want to spoil too much. No, there's not too much to spoil with him because you pretty much know what's going to happen to him, uh, given the type of movie it is. So, uh, there's not too much there. That being said, uh, the old couple who they rent the farm home from, you can tell there's something off with them. The old man is a curmudgeon. He doesn't necessarily approve. He doesn't know for sure what they're doing, but he doesn't necessarily approve all of them being there together. And there's some weird things, and you can tell right away that there are some issues with his wife. Now, one of the interesting choices that Ty West chose to do with this is he chose to have the old people be young people in makeup. And this is in my opinion, this is a classic blunder in filmmaking for the most part. It's been done well a couple of times, but it's few and far between that actually works. It just it looks weird. You get a bit of that uncanny valley feel going on, and it's not the greatest. So you have to battle with that a little bit. Personally, I think that it was done purposefully for the old lady and the final girl. We'll put it that way. Um, to mirror one another. I'm pretty sure that was the reason for it. Um, Once again, there were a lot of through lines in this movie. None of them paid off, and that's just one of them where there could have been a mirroring of the characters, and there was tangentially, but it didn't actually connect in any real point. So that's one of the through lines. So as I mentioned previously, going back to the director's character, as I said, he wanted to make this film. He wanted it to be an important film. He wanted to make a real movie with adult material in it. So you have the producer saying the shots that he needs to make the type of movie that he's making. Um, Anyone who has seen a porn before knows that most of them follow particular beats. So this is one of the things that the producer says needs to be in his movie, and the director and him butt heads on this because he wants to make an important film. This is a through line that I saw in the movie and thought that, hey, this could be really cool. This could be a really interesting mirroring of the movie that we're watching, right? So you have a movie called X. It's about an adult film crew making a gratuitous movie. And the movie itself is an independent film crew making a gratuitous movie with some competence. So when I was first watching it, I was thinking, okay, the theme of this movie is going to kind of follow this director. It's going to follow this theme of mirroring, where we're going to have a gratuitous throwback to the grindhouse era, but done in an artistic way, and it's gonna have deeper meaning to it. And so Ty West is going to fulfill the endeavors of the director in the inside the movie, and it was going to be this fun meta mirroring. That doesn't end up happening. It turns out that the director is portrayed in this movie as being the jealous and whiny, and is the first to be killed. It there's no playthrough with that theme. Um, you could look at that as being Ty West saying that you can't make an adult film an important piece of art. Maybe personally, I think that it's just one of several, as I'll get to, through lines that don't actually connect. I don't think there is any deeper meaning to it, unfortunately, because it would have been interesting, right? So that leads us to the director's girlfriend. The reason why he throws a hissy fit is because she was just supposed to be the sound technician, decides that she wants to be in the movie. And this is portrayed in the movie as her having, this epiphany of will, if you allow it. This idea of wanting to express something entirely her own without anyone's approval or without anyone say so. She wanted to do it. She decided to do it. It's portrayed in the movie as being an empowering, positive thing, right? Um, you can take that for what you will. I mean, if you want to see it that way, you can. To me, it's just someone who agreed to be in an adult film for relatively little pay and didn't have to be. So a little odd, um, if you think of it in terms of any type of reality, which I wouldn't suggest doing with this movie because it's not really trying to be. And really, once the movie starts to get going, it kind of uh, throws off any any pretense that might have been there for this film being more than just a slasher film. It turns into a slasher film, and the truly subversive parts of it will be spoilers. So I'll get to those later. But they are subversive aspects. I don't think done as well as they could have been, and um, I mean, for the most part, made the film more interesting than it otherwise could have been. So I don't want to say too much negative about it. Um, so yeah, basically they get here, they shoot this film, and then the elderly lady who obviously has some form of dementia starts killing the husband, becomes very jealous because he has a little dementia too, thinks that the men are trying to steal his wife, and he starts killing. They become a killing pair, and then things happen, and so on and so forth. It's a slasher film. Have the final girl, the normal stuff. So I think the fact that the slashers turn out to be um, anything but supernatural villains, and instead are an old dementia-ridden couple, which is somewhat subversive and interesting. Uh, Once again, I'll get to why I think it could have been a little bit better. So I'm gonna get into spoilers now. I know that I didn't really say too much that would really grab you and make you want to go see it. I will say that if you're interested in independent filmmaking, if you're interested in grindhouse cinema, if you're interested in slasher films, this movie is decent. If you're in that genre, you like that genre, and you don't mind um, a fair bit of sex and nudity, then it's a decent film. So if you're into that, I would suggest you go watch it. Come back. We can listen. You can listen to the spoiler, and then we can uh, discuss what you think of my opinions. You can leave in the comments and so forth, um, and we'll go from there. So I'm gonna get into spoilers now. So the subversion and the mirroring that happens between the main characters and the elderly couple. The elderly woman was a famous, semi famous, in her husband's eyes, dancer. She had reached a form of stardom. Her star had faded, at least in their own estimation, you know, due to age. And so this movie was kind of presenting this juxtaposition of squandered talent, or even how even stardom doesn't last forever. It's painting this picture by mirroring the two. Someone at the very beginning of their journey, someone at the very end of their journey. That aspect of it was somewhat interesting, particularly put into a slasher film where the slashers are the elderly couple. So it was somewhat interesting in that regard. The One of the main catalysts of the film, though, is the jealousy of the elderly husband and the elderly wife. The elderly wife is a sex starved, mentally addled elderly woman who tries to seduce these men and these women. And of course, because of age and appearance and the fact that she's married to the person they're renting from, is rebuffed in her advances, leading her to kill. And the elderly gentleman, because of his jealousy of her, leads him to kill the people who she didn't even have interactions with, because he thinks that everyone is, which leads to us realizing that he has done this previously with people who um, he thought was trying to to take his wife. Now, a lot of this was uh, a lot of this was caused by the elderly gentleman be having a weak heart and being scared of having sex with his wife. He's very much afraid that the activity would cause him to have another heart attack. Now, what happens as they go and they start killing everyone? This apparently kindles quite a spark, and they consummate their bloody bed, if you will, if to quite a literal and metaphorical image. So that was a subversion too, where they're making it mirrored with the adult film that was being made by these younger quote unquote beautiful people is now being essentially taken over by these elderly people past their prime. And so that was one of the film's shock scenes, but and you can tell that they're just people in costumes and makeup, so it is a little weird, a little uncanny valley, and kind of mixing all of that up. So there was that, and that was interesting. Now, what happened though is at this point, after they had had their sexy time, there are only two people left at that point because they've killed everyone else off at this point, and it's both of the girls, the sound technician woman, and the final girl, the one who throughout the whole movie is constantly repeating how she's going to be a star, how she deserves to be a star. What would have been interesting is if the what would have been interesting is if the sex between the elderly couple was actually their sacrifice and catalyst for the wife to kill. So what I mean by that is what would have been interesting is if the the wife kills the first person, and this sparks the same kind of feeling within the the husband as after they had killed a bunch of them, and he actually does die according to his feelings or his worries while while copulating, if you want to call it that. Um, and then be, because of that, that's the final straw that makes the wife completely snap and kill everyone else. That would have been more, in my opinion, that would have been a little bit more interesting. It would have added a little bit more motivation. It would have been a little bit more clear about what was, the through line of wanting everyone else to die. Um, I think it would have been a little bit more compelling as far as a story and narrative goes, of presenting it that way. And that's just my opinion, though. And then when there were only two left, the sound technician, despite the character development that her choice to be in the movie was supposed to be, that of her becoming a strong and strongly willed person, she instead freaks out and just runs out the door. This leads to her getting shot in the face with half of her face being blown off, and the final girl taking a shot at the elderly man and the elderly woman and missing and causing the elderly man to have a heart attack because he got scared. So the elderly man ends up having a heart attack anyway, but is far less compelling than if it would have been while being out of his mind with a jealous slash passionate uh, romp with his wife. Personally, I think that would have been more interesting than him just getting scared to death. Then, of course, the elderly woman, she takes up the shotgun and shoots it, but her being so wayfish, it knocks her completely off the porch, breaking her hip, and then the final girl just runs over her with the car to end the movie. So a little anticlimactic. So it's still just playing on the mirroring between the young and the old. And the thing with this movie is that no one is particularly likable or particularly evil except for the elderly couple. Um, they're all just kind of middle of the road. The main final girl is singularly minded. She's only focused on being a star. She doesn't care about anyone else or anything else other than becoming a star, other than becoming famous. The producer I mentioned previously, he provides the money, so he thinks he needs to call all the shots, which leads him to be somewhat protective in some instances and also a total asshole in other instances. Then you have the somewhat jaded actress whom essentially just anticipates herself to be where she is and just wants the money. And you have the director who has these grand ideas but doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to actually make them happen. And you have the girlfriend who proves that point by the first moment of standing up to her boyfriend, him freaking out and leaving, causing himself to be killed. Then, of course, you have the Vietnam vet who's basically just having fun, um, who does present himself to be a very honorable person, but has so little direction in his life and doesn't really care to that it's somewhat makes his character seem much less interesting than he otherwise could have been. So you have these characters that are just, as I mentioned, they're stereotypical of that industry, but they don't really have any depth. They're not really hate. They're not. You don't hate them, but you also don't like them. So when terrible things happen to you, it's more just kind of a shrug of the shoulder. It's not like, oh no, that terrible thing happened. It's just like, oh, eh, that happened. Okay. Yeah, that's basic. That's kind of how I feel about this movie. It's kind of like, oh, that happened. Okay. I mean, for a movie called X, that it takes place and is meant to be an homage to the peak era of grindhouse cinema, meant to be right before and during the uh, beginning of the slasher film, beginning of that genre. Excuse me. It's quite tame for that. Now, I mean, I wasn't expecting to walk in on an adult film or anything like that. I wouldn't have seen it if I thought that was the case. I have no desire to watch that kind of thing. But I was expecting it to be um, a little bit more intense than this movie was. The sexuality and the gore, in my opinion, or at least compared to a, a great many movies that I've seen in this time period and genre, was quite tame, comparatively. Not that I'm necessarily complaining about that. It's another thing that kind of subverts expectations a little bit. You're expecting it to be to ramp up a little bit more than it did, and for some of you that might be a good thing. For others, you might it might make you want to watch it even less. But that was something that I found interesting as well. Is the fact that it was as tame as it was. And I think the real the real moment where it was trying to push the shock was the elderly woman trying to seduce everyone. I think that's they were anticipating that to be much the biggest shock value of the film. Uh, so that was interesting. But we've already discussed how I thought that I think that the director's character should have been more important in the movie, or maybe not even the director's point of view should have been a little bit more interesting. and the through line of the movie should have been a mirroring of real life almost, as far as what they were trying to do with this movie. I thought that would have been interesting. I thought that the husband dying in the act of pleasing his wife would have been more interesting for the wife's motivation. I also think that the last thing that I think that would have made this movie significantly better is the reoccurring theme of the main girl. So throughout this whole movie, we keep on going back to these clips from a televangelist talking about how his daughter went missing, how she is giving herself over to the devil, how she is going to hell, all of this stuff. You then at the end of the movie find out that it is the main girl who is this televangelist's daughter who's left. So her decree throughout the whole movie is that she's going to be a star no matter what. She deserves it. She has worked for it. She's going to do it. Juxtaposed with the televangelist saying essentially that she's sold her soul to the devil, that she's going to hell. So what ends up happening is she just kills the old lady, drives off, and then says one more time in the truck as she's driving away her mantra of her being a star. What would have been interesting and what would have tied the juxtaposition together is if instead of her driving away, is we instead have the end scene where she becomes a star for surviving the murderous spree from these crazy old people, right? So the swing would then be is televangelist's father saying that she sold her soul to the devil and she's going to hell. Her then saying that she's been through hell and she has risen from the ashes and is now a star. She's the phoenix. So it's a whole arc, It's that way. It's this way. So in that way, it's a whole arc, and it's not an uncompleted arc. Just like everything else in this movie, uncompleted arcs. That would have made it a complete arc, where the father is indicating she's dead and going to hell. She survives a massacre. She says she's been through hell and that she's risen like a phoenix, and her stardom is now associated with being a final girl. So instead of being a final girl in a low budget horror film, she's a final girl in real life. So you have this full arc that really would have made her character interesting as opposed to just being meh. Because the only thing we know about her character is that she had a overbearing father and that she wants to be a star. But there's no meat to any of it. Whereas if she would have, then there would have actually been a complete through line through the whole movie tying everything together. That would have made it more interesting. But what we got was not that. I'm not the filmmaker, I'm not the director, and I'm not the writer, so it doesn't matter what I think. But I'm the one who has to watch it. And so I watched it, and that's what I think about it. I think that it was okay instead of very interesting or very good even. So, I don't want to, it's a perfectly fine movie, but it could have been great. And those are, more often than not, those are the movies that I really like doing videos for. Those movies that are just on the verge. They have a really good idea, and they just kind of, they miss out on that idea. I talked about this with Moon Knight, where it had a really good idea, but it was in the last 30 seconds of the entire show. They missed the opportunity to make a really interesting story, and instead just kind of went with what was right available to them. So I kind of feel the same way with this movie, where cinematography and the filmmaking, everything like that was impeccable, very, very good. But just the story itself, the story arcs, the through lines, the plot devices, all of it kind of fell short. It all seemed kind of truncated, and none of it seemed like it really was cohesive. So that's where I stand on that. Please, if you've seen the movie, leave a comment and let me know what you thought about it. Let me know if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right. What were your favorite parts of the movie? Let me know. Leave me a comment, and I'd be more than happy to discuss all that with you. I'd also always welcome constructive criticism. keyword there is constructive. If you just want to make fun of me, then whatever. If you've watched any part of the video, I get a view, and you've wasted your time saying something that doesn't help anyone or do anything. You're not going to make me mad, so it's a waste of your time. So constructive criticism is always welcome. So please leave a comment, uh, and yeah, watch the movie, I guess, if you're into this kind of thing. Thank you once again, my friends, for joining me. I am Justin C. Bartlett with the Dime Store Cinema, reminding you all to fill your lives with amazing stories.